Someone found it on a beach in Australia and picked it up without hesitation. It was the size of a thumb, blue and silver, with what looked like feathery tendrils running down its back. It looked like something a child would invent if asked to draw an ocean creature. They posted the photo online, and within hours researchers were identifying it. Glaucus atlanticus. This is its scientific name and what most researchers use. The blue sea dragon is the most common informal name used in English. The blue glaucus appears in scientific literature when a shorter form is needed. The sea swallow is used in older natural history writing primarily. It has at least 6 common names, and none of them are quite adequate. Because this animal does not fit neatly into any category most people have for ocean creatures. It is a nudibranchi, a sea slug. And that category alone contains almost 3,000 known species. A soft-bodied, shellless marine gastropod found floating at the surface of open ocean worldwide. It is typically between 3 and 8 centimeters long, depending on age and feeding history. It weighs almost nothing, lighter than a piece of paper of the same surface area. It has no hard parts, no shell, no spine, no teeth in any conventional sense. And it eats the Portuguese man-o-war not by accident but as its primary prey, not avoids the man-o-war, actively hunts and eats it as the main food source. The Portuguese man-o-war, whose tentacles can stretch 30 meters and cause severe pain in adult humans. The one that kills people every few years directly and sends thousands to hospitals annually. Glaucus atlanticus eats it for nutrition and then takes its weapons, and uses those stolen stinging cells as its own defensive and offensive weapons. Let's start with what Glaucus actually is before we get to the theft. It belongs to the order Nudibranchia, a group of shellless sea slugs numbering around 3,000 known species. Nudibranchs as a group are already genuinely unusual among all mollusk species. Most mollusks produce a shell for protection. Clams, oysters, snails' mussels all follow this pattern. Nudibranchs discarded the shell at some point in their evolutionary history and compensated through other means. Vivid warning colors, chemical defenses borrowed or self-produced, and structural adaptations. Glaucus atlanticus took this compensation strategy further than most. Rather than developing its own chemical defenses from scratch, it evolved the ability to steal finished weapons from animals that had already done the work of producing them. This is a strategy called Kleptocnidy, literally theft of cnidae. Cnidae are the stinging cells used by jellyfish, man-o-wars, anemones, and related animals. A cnida contains a tiny harpoon-like structure coiled under pressure inside a specialized cell. When triggered by chemical or physical contact, this structure fires outward, penetrating skin and injecting venom in a fraction of a second. The Portuguese man-o-war uses these structures in enormous quantities along its trailing tentacles to paralyze fish, crustaceans, and other prey that encounter them. Most animals that contact man-o-war tentacles are immediately stung and either paralyzed or deterred. Glaucus atlanticus is not affected in any significant way by this venom during feeding. Exactly how it achieves this protection is still not fully understood at the molecular level, but researchers believe it involves a combination of factors. Its muscular feeding movements may prevent the mechanical triggering of stinging cells during consumption. Its digestive tract appears to process the stinging cells without activating them, and it may produce or harbor compounds that suppress the firing trigger mechanism selectively. The stinging cells that are not fired during the digestion process are sorted and transported. They move through the digestive system without being broken down chemically and are redirected into specialized storage sacs called cnidosacs. These cnidosacs are located at the tips of the serrata, the elongated finger-like projections visible on Glaucus's back and sides. Each serous tip can hold a significant number of functional, unfired stinging cells taken from prey. When Glaucus is threatened or handled, the cnidosacs can discharge these stored stinging cells outward, delivering concentrated stings to whatever is touching or squeezing the animal. And here is the detail that consistently surprises people when they first learn about it. The sting delivered by Glaucus atlanticus is reported to be more potent than the man-o-war sting directly. Several documented cases exist of people picking Glaucus off beaches, receiving significant stings from an animal most people would consider harmless by size alone, and experiencing pain comparable to, or in some reports exceeding, what a direct man-o-war contact produces. The concentration effect appears to be the primary explanation researchers currently favor. A man-o-war distributes its stinging cells across enormous length of tentacle. Glaucus concentrates the harvested cells into the small, dense tips of its serrata. A much higher density of stinging cells in a much smaller area means each contact with a serrata tip delivers a more concentrated dose than trailing tentacle contact typically would. The animal doing the stealing ends up with a more effective weapon than the animal it stole from. This is the detail I kept returning to when I started reading about this species. Not just that it steals the weapon, but that the theft improves the weapon in the process of acquiring it. Now let's talk about how Glaucus actually lives, because its lifestyle is as unusual as its feeding strategy. Glaucus atlanticus is a pelagic organism. It lives at the surface of the open ocean, not near reefs, not near coastlines, in the open water of tropical and subtropical oceans worldwide. It floats upside down at the very surface of the ocean at all times. Its blue ventral surface faces directly upward toward the open sky above the water, and its silver dorsal side faces downward toward the deeper water beneath it. This coloration arrangement is called counter-shading, and it serves a specific protective purpose. The blue upper surface blends with the surface of the ocean when seen from above by birds. The silver lower surface blends with the bright sky when seen from below by fish. This is the same coloration strategy used by many open ocean animals, including some shark species, and many seabirds, blue or dark above silver or white below. The camouflage works in two directions simultaneously and costs nothing to maintain after the initial pigmentation is established. Glaucus maintains its position at the surface by storing a bubble of air in its own stomach, a small pocket of swallowed air held internally that provides exactly enough buoyancy to keep the animal at the surface. This mechanism means the animal cannot voluntarily sink below the surface. It is locked at the surface film of the ocean by its own internal air bubble. This creates vulnerability. It cannot escape by diving when threatened from above. But it also means it remains consistently in contact with its primary prey, which also floats at the surface. The Portuguese man-o-war is itself a surface dweller unable to submerge voluntarily. Glaucus and its prey share the same impossible-to-leave surface film of the open ocean, and Glaucus evolved an entire feeding and defensive system around that shared constraint. It finds man-o-wars by drifting in the same wind and current patterns that carry its prey. Both Glaucus and man-o-war are at the mercy of wind and current for their horizontal movement. They accumulate in the same convergence zones, where ocean currents meet and push floating material together. This is why when man-o-wars appear on beaches in large numbers, Glaucus often appears at the same time and in the same locations. They are passengers on the same moving water and arrive together. The beaches of Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the Atlantic coasts of Europe and North America have all recorded mass strandings of Glaucus alongside Portuguese man-o-war events. This has led to multiple documented cases of beach visitors being stung by Glaucus after picking up what looked like an unusual and harmless blue sea creature. The unintuitive appearance works against any instinctive danger assessment a person might apply. It does not look like a jellyfish, so the standard jellyfish warning does not trigger. It does not look like any dangerous animal category most people recognize from previous experience. It is small and visually striking in a way that invites closer examination rather than caution. Now let's talk about reproduction, because Glaucus atlanticus is a hermaphrodite. Every individual of this species produces both male and female reproductive cells simultaneously. When two Glaucus individuals meet, they can each fertilize the other. Both individuals in an encounter can leave the interaction as egg layers, rather than one being the fertilizing partner and one being the fertilized partner. The eggs are laid in strings on the surfaces or remains of prey items, often directly on the float of a consumed man-o-war. This means the prey animal serves not only as food for the adult, but as a substrate for the next generation of the predator that ate it. The eggs hatch as free-swimming larvae that pass through a planktonic larval stage before settling into the adult form. During the larval stage, they are not yet equipped with the adult's feeding and storage capabilities. They must develop the cnidosac structure before they can begin harvesting stinging cells from prey effectively. Researchers believe the development of this structure is linked to first exposure to appropriate prey items. The timing and mechanism of this developmental trigger is still being actively investigated. Now let's address the taxonomy briefly, because this is where some confusion exists in popular coverage of Glaucus. The animal is commonly called the blue dragon or the sea dragon in popular coverage. These informal names are shared across several related but distinct nudibranch species. These names are informal and shared across several related but distinct nudibranch species. Glaucus atlanticus is the most widely distributed and most commonly encountered member of a small genus. Glaucus marginatus is a closely related smaller species found in similar ocean regions. Both species share the basic body plan coloration and Kleptocnidy strategy, but differ in size distribution and some structural details of the serrata arrangement. When researchers or journalists refer to the blue dragon, they typically mean Glaucus atlanticus specifically, though the common names are used somewhat interchangeably in popular coverage in a way that creates confusion. This matters because the specific documented details of Cnidosac development, prey preference, and sting reports are mostly established for Glaucus atlanticus specifically rather than for the genus as a whole, and researchers are still working to determine which details apply specifically to this species alone, versus which represent shared characteristics across the Glaucus genus more broadly. Now let's talk about what we don't know about Glaucus atlanticus because the gaps are significant. Despite the dramatic nature of its biology and its increasing appearance in viral online content, Glaucus atlanticus is not a well-studied species by the standards of marine biology research. Open ocean surface-dwelling animals are extremely difficult to study systematically. They cannot be easily collected in controlled numbers for laboratory study. They cannot be maintained long-term in captivity under normal conditions without significant difficulty. Their natural behavior in open water is almost impossible to observe directly for extended periods. What we know about their feeding behavior comes largely from specimen analysis and limited aquarium observations. The exact molecular mechanism by which they avoid triggering Cnidae during prey consumption is not confirmed. The specifics of how Cnidosac loading and concentration occurs is not fully characterized at the cellular level. The degree to which they can selectively choose which stinging cells to store versus digest is not established. The full range of prey species they consume beyond man-o-war in different ocean regions is not comprehensively documented. This is an animal that produces viral online content every few years when beachgoers photograph strandings. And yet the fundamental biology of how it does, what makes it remarkable, is still significantly incomplete in the published research literature. This gap between public fascination and actual scientific knowledge is a pattern that shows up repeatedly with visually striking small organisms that are difficult to study systematically. Charismatic size and dramatic behavior attract attention and photography, but laboratory access and research funding tend to follow more economically or medically significant species. Glaucus atlanticus sits in a difficult position, dramatic enough to attract public interest, but small enough and open ocean enough to be genuinely difficult to study with the rigor the questions deserve. Now let's return to the stinging cells one more time because there is one more detail worth examining closely. Researchers have identified that different man-o-war individuals carry stinging cells of slightly different potency, depending on factors including the age of the individual prey animal and the ocean region where it developed. This creates an interesting question about whether Glaucus selectively targets more potent man-o-wars when multiple prey items happen to be available in the same location, and whether the potency of the stored arsenal in a given Glaucus individual reflects the potency of its recent prey. Researchers working on this question have not yet produced definitive results, but the possibility that Glaucus effectively upgrades its defensive arsenal by feeding on more potent prey individuals is a question that appears in the current research literature. This would add another layer of sophistication to an already unusual defensive strategy. A predator not only stealing weapons from prey, but potentially selecting prey partly based on weapon quality. Write in the comments if you had seen this animal before today, because every time a large stranding event happens somewhere in the world and photographs appear online, a significant number of people see Glaucus atlanticus for the first time and cannot immediately believe it is real. It exists, and it is one of the more unusual animals in the open ocean. It floats upside down at the very surface of the ocean at all times on the open ocean surface. It eats one of the most dangerous animals in the water around it, and it keeps the stolen weapons stored in its own body ready to use against anything that threatens it. Now let's talk about the Portuguese man-o-war more specifically. because understanding the prey is necessary to understand the scale of what Glaucus is actually doing. The Portuguese man-o-war is not actually a jellyfish. This surprises many people. This is the most common misconception about it, and it matters for understanding what Glaucus eats. It is a siphonophore, a colonial organism made up of many individual animals called zooids. Each zooid is genetically identical to the others, but performs a different specialized function. The float, the tentacles, the feeding polyps, and the reproductive structures are all separate specialized organisms living together as a coordinated colony. They cannot survive independently, and the whole colony functions as a single coordinated predator. The float alone can reach 30 centimeters in length, and it is filled with gas, giving the colony its buoyancy. Beneath the float, the tentacles can trail for up to 30 meters in large individuals. Each tentacle is lined with millions of stinging cells along its entire length, and the venom they deliver contains a complex mixture of proteins, enzymes, and other compounds, capable of causing significant pain, inflammation, cardiovascular effects, and in rare cases, death in humans. The man-o-war has no brain and no central nervous system in any conventional sense. It has no intention, no behavior, and no capacity to avoid or pursue anything actively. It simply drifts, and its tentacles encounter prey by contact. The system is passive, but at the scale of millions of stinging cells across 30 meters of trailing tentacle. Passive is sufficient to capture fish, crustaceans, and other prey effectively. Glaucus atlanticus eats this colonial organism by biting off portions of the tentacle directly. It consumes individual zooids from the float body and takes what it needs from each part of the colony. A single Glaucus individual has been observed in controlled conditions, consuming prey significantly larger than itself. The size disparity between predator and prey in this relationship is genuinely unusual, and the fact that the smaller animal is the one doing the hunting and consuming is part of what makes this predator-prey relationship so counterintuitive to most observers. Now let's talk about how researchers actually study Glaucus atlanticus, given how difficult it is to access in the wild. The primary source of specimens for laboratory study has historically been stranding events. When wind and current conditions push surface-dwelling organisms toward coastlines, Glaucus individuals wash ashore along with man-o-wars and other surface fauna. Researchers positioned near areas with frequent stranding events, parts of the Australian coast for example, have been able to collect living specimens immediately after stranding for short-term study. The challenge is that Glaucus does not survive well in standard aquarium conditions for extended periods. It requires very specific water motion surface film conditions and prey availability to maintain normal behavior. Most laboratory specimens survive only days to weeks before declining. This severely limits the kinds of experiments that can be conducted and how long any individual study can run. Citizen science has become an important supplementary data source for researchers studying this species, because beachgoers with smartphones now document stranding events extensively with photographs and location data. Platforms for reporting marine wildlife sightings have accumulated substantial geographic and temporal data on stranding events. This crowdsourced information gives researchers a much better picture of where and when Glaucus appears globally than would be possible from researcher-conducted surveys alone, given how rarely stranding events are predictable. The visual distinctiveness of Glaucus atlanticus makes it reliable for non-expert identification from photographs. Its coloration and body form are sufficiently unusual that misidentification by photographers is relatively rare, compared to many marine invertebrate species where expert identification from photographs is genuinely difficult. This makes citizen science data for Glaucus relatively high quality as a supplementary information source. Now let's examine the countershading coloration in more detail, because it represents a sophisticated evolutionary solution to a very specific problem. An animal floating at the ocean surface is exposed to potential predators from two completely different directions simultaneously. From above, aerial predators like seabirds see it against the ocean surface background. From below, aquatic predators like fish see it against the bright sky visible through the water surface. Standard camouflage that works well against one background tends to fail against the other. The countershading solution addresses both problems at once through a single color arrangement. Dark or colored on the top surface to blend with open water as seen from above. Pale or silvery on the bottom surface to blend with the sky visible through water from below. This specific arrangement has evolved independently in many ocean surface animals, precisely because it solves both predation directions simultaneously with a single color scheme. For Glaucus, the intense blue of the dorsal surface provides good camouflage against the blue-gray ocean surface as seen by birds, and the silver of the ventral surface blends with the bright diffuse light coming down through the water surface as seen by fish. The color is not just decorative, and it is not warning coloration in the traditional sense. It is bidirectional camouflage specifically tuned to the unique threat environment of the open ocean surface, and it works alongside the stolen stinging cell defense rather than replacing it. Camouflage reduces the chance of being found, and the stinging cells handle encounters that happen despite the camouflage. The combination of passive concealment and active chemical defense is what makes Glaucus atlanticus a genuinely successful open ocean predator despite its size. Despite being small, soft-bodied, and essentially unable to escape any predator that actually commits to pursuing it. I find myself returning to this combination repeatedly when thinking about this animal. Everything about its biology is built around the specific constraint of being locked at the ocean surface. Unable to dive, unable to swim against currents, and dependent on the same wind and water that carries its prey. Within that constraint, it evolved a countershading arrangement that addresses both threat directions, a method for eating one of the ocean's most dangerous prey items without being harmed, a mechanism for stealing and concentrating that prey's weapons, and a reproductive strategy that uses the remains of consumed prey as egg substrate. The entire life history of this animal is a series of connected solutions to the specific problems created by floating at the ocean surface unable to leave it. Each solution in its biology connects directly to all the others around it. None of them would make sense in isolation from the constraint of being locked at the surface. Write in the comments if you knew this animal existed before today, because the reaction I see most often when people encounter Glaucus atlanticus for the first time is genuine disbelief that something this visually extreme is a real animal rather than a designed illustration. It looks like the result of someone trying to invent the most visually striking possible small ocean creature, and the result would be something that actually exists in the real ocean right now. Floating upside down right now, somewhere in the tropical ocean surface, slowly eating one of the most venomous things in the water around it. There is one last thing worth saying about Glaucus atlanticus specifically. It almost certainly exists in greater numbers than we have any way of measuring accurately. It lives in open ocean far from any coastline for most of its life, invisible to any observation method we currently have available for surface ocean environments. What we see in strandings and what researchers manage to collect represents a tiny fraction of the real population, somewhere in the warm surface water of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans right now. There are Glaucus individuals floating upside down consuming man-o'-war, stealing their stinging cells and storing them in the tips of their chirata, in numbers that researchers cannot estimate with any confidence at all. The open ocean surface is one of the least observed environments on the planet. For an animal this small living this far from any observable coastline or shore, we are essentially blind to how many there are and what they do when nothing is stranding them.